Earth is a solid mass, not quite spherical in shape. It's divided into layers of which has a distinct composition. The rocky outer layer of the Earth is called the crust. It's composed primarily of granite and basalt. The crust covers the entire surface of the Earth. Beneath the crust is a layer called the mantle. The mantle is composed of hot melted rock, called magma, that flows in slow-moving currents. The magma of the mantle is made up of different minerals than those in the solid rock of the crust. Below the mantle is the outer core. The outer core is thought to be composed of dense molten rock made up of iron, nickel, and silicon. The inner core is the innermost layer of the Earth. It's composed of iron and nickel. The temperature at the inner core is about 5,000 degrees Celsius, or 9,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This heat radiates outward from the center of the Earth. Despite the extreme heat, the inner core is solid due to the increased pressure there. In Activity 1, students are introduced to the inner structure of the Earth. They will examine a hard-boiled egg and relate it to the structure of the Earth, discuss the properties of each layer, and label a diagram of the cross-section of the Earth. The vocabulary introduced in this activity is continent, crust, inner core, magma, mantle, model, and outer core. For this activity, you will need to supply a globe, a world map, a sharp serrated knife, hard-boiled eggs that have not been peeled, a black broad-tip marker, paper towels, and the activity sheet 1 for each student. To prepare for this activity, hard-boil the eggs, and when they're cool, cut them in half with the knife. I like to use a serrated knife because it cuts a little bit cleaner. Do not peel the eggs. Each team will receive 1/2 of an egg. Conceptualizing the Earth and its interior is difficult for elementary level students. However, the use of a model helps bridge the gap between abstract conceptions and concrete examples. The globe, it represents what the Earth looks like from a distance. This activity begins by asking questions about the features of the globe and what they represent. Students are asked questions such as, what does the blue part of the globe represent, which is the oceans, and what covers the rest of the surface, which would be land. By examining the globe, students can infer that 3/4 of the Earth's surface is covered by water, and the rest is mostly land mass. The students recall or learn that continents are the very large land masses surrounded by larger bodies of water. You will find that some students can even name the oceans and the continents. Students are questioned about what they think is beneath the surface of the continents, and they are challenged to imagine what they would see if all of the water in the oceans dried up. Students are introduced to the concept of model. A model is a smaller or larger version of an object that is used to represent the actual object. What are some examples of models that students might be familiar with or may have used?
Well, I think they might think of the models that they've built with their parents, such as cars or airplane models, for instance, or they might even think of even larger models, such as solar system.
So a smaller model could represent a larger object. Students are divided into teams of 2, and each team will receive 1/2 of an egg, a black felt tip marker, and paper towel. Every student also receives a copy of Activity Sheet 1. Kathy, what I'd like for you to do is to put a black circle in the center of the yolk.
Okay. About like this?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay. Now, observe the cross-section of the egg and compare it to the activity sheet that the students will be using.
Oh, yes, I see several layers there. I see the outer layer, which would be the crust.
Okay. Property is a term that describes the characteristic of an object or describes how something acts. Students will learn the properties of the structures of the earth. Look at the words at the top of the activity sheet. Kathy, what are those?
We have ocean, continent, crust, mantle, outer core, and inner core.
Okay. What part of the egg model does the crust represent?
I think that the shell part of the egg actually represents the crust.
Okay. And what do you observe about the thickness of the shell?
It's very thin. In fact, it's even hard to see a little bit.
Okay.
Because it's so thin.
All right. So compared to the rest of the egg, the shell will be very thin, just as the crust of the earth. What are some geographical features that would be on the crust of the earth or the outer layer of the egg?
Well, we would see continents, land, and then we would also see water, or the oceans of the earth.
Okay.
Our geographical features.
All right. If you were to dig down deep enough into the crust, into the continental crust of the earth, what do you think you would find?
Well, I think after we get under the soil, we'll probably find rock.
So it's pretty deep down. Well, if we were to go down deep enough into the ocean, down to the ocean floor, what would we find beneath the surface of the ocean floor?
I think the students might think a lot of sand, but we want them to go on and think about what might be under the sand, just like what might be under the soil, and think that that might be rock too, which also is a continuation of the crust.
Great, yes. Okay, so what we can conclude about the property of the Earth's crust is that the crust is a thin layer of soil over solid rocks. So what words could we label that are related to the crust of the Earth, Kathy?
Well, I think we can add the continents right here.
All right, those will be the land masses,
And the oceans down here. And then I think we can label the crust for the outer layer.
Great. Okay. Scientists have discovered 3 more layers below the crust. The layer just below the crust of the Earth is the mantle. Kathy, which part of the egg do you think represents the mantle?
Well, if it's just below the crust, it would have to be the egg white that's in here.
Exactly. The mantle consists of rock in a thick semi-liquid form that is called magma. Why do you think magma is a liquid, Kathy?
Well, for it to be a liquid, it must be very, very hot. And we want the students also to know it's not a liquid like you would pour water, but it's a thick molasses type substance.
Kind of like pancake batter? All right. Let's label the mantle on our sheet.
Okay, and I think it'll be down here since we're talking about this part. Okay.
All right. Now, let's locate the outer core.
Well, if it's the outer core, it must be this yellow part of the yolk.
That's exactly right. The outer core is made up of melted metals. If the metals in the outer core are melted, what can you infer about the temperature of the outer core?
Well, that it must be very extremely hot also, and under a lot of pressure.
Sure. The inner core is the innermost layer of the Earth. Which part of our egg model represents the inner core, Kathy?
Well, I would say it's this very black center.
Okay. Scientists believe the inner core is made of solid metals. The temperature of the inner core is extremely hot, and so is the pressure is very, very intense. Consequently, scientists believe that the metals in the inner core are solid rather than liquid.
Okay, let's label the part, inner core and outer core. Okay.
Okay. Kathy, let's look at our model of the cross-section of the Earth and the egg. Why is our egg a good model of the Earth?
Well, it shows all of the layers, the crust, the mantle, inner and outer core.
Okay, and the relative spatial relativity. In what ways is the egg not a good model?
Well, it doesn't show the features on the land, such as continents and oceans, and it's a solid instead of a liquid like the magma would be, and we don't have the heat that's
right.
going on in our egg.
Not hardly. Okay, so clean up. You'll need to collect and dispose of the paper towels and the egg parts. Then guide the students to the reading on pages 2 and 3 in a Delta Science Reader.